It says benefit feed, the swear words. There are people in masks, a lot of students against the coalition. They're saying Tory scum. 40 students on the roof of Millbank above the offices. They're raining down. It's looking very wet.
Over the past 20 years, the cost of going to universities increased by almost 10 times. However, the impact of university fees has affected people for decades. In 1999, the cost of 1 year of university was capped at £1,000. Today, students will pay an average of £9,250. The debate and outrage at the drastic increase of fees has long been debated in Parliament, and there is still no solution in sight. In July 1998, Labour passed the Teaching and Higher Education Bill. This meant that students whose families earned less than £23,000 per year would be exempt from fees, whereas students whose families earned over £35,000 a year would be charged the full fees, which amounted to £1,000 a year.
Mr Corbyn, thanks for joining us. Now, your party, the Labour Party, actually introduced student fees in the first place, so shouldn't you be sharing the responsibility in this and supporting the government rather than opposing it?
Well, firstly, I opposed the student fees and voted against them under a Labour government. They were wrong to do it, and I think it was setting off a trend which we are now seeing the consequences of.
In 2016, the Labour Party, under Jeremy Corbyn, pledged to abolish university fees if they were elected. Many people believed that this would not be possible, but some still had hope.
Jeremy Corbyn said that if he was in power, he would abolish tuition fees. I don't know how true that is or if he could actually do that, but I mean, I like him, so hopefully if he was in power then that might happen.
I know that Labour pledged to abolish university fees, but I don't think that would be a smart or possible idea for them to do.
Today, the majority of young people are in support of the Labour Party because of this promise. Whether true or false, they seem to have won over the millennial population of the country. However, even if Labour were to get in power, there would still be a lot of issues with how university and student finances are handled.
I think that the way that student finance works isn't fair at all, because I know certain people who get the highest maintenance loan just for personal reasons, but they also have quite a lot of money coming into them from their parents as well. I don't think it should be about how much your parents earn, because even though my parents personally earn quite a lot, they don't have that much money. So out of my friends, I get the lowest maintenance loan and I also have the least money. So I don't think that it's fair, and I think bursaries are good, but that's the only thing that should be kept. I don't think maintenance loans should depend on your parents' income.
I would make all higher education free. Students shouldn't have to pay for anything at all, because everybody's got a right to an education, and nobody should be in a position where they have to be in debt for the rest of their lives. And I think if you've ever read anything by Chomsky says that the governments do this in the US and Britain just to get people into debt, because people will be so involved in having to pay the debt off, they won't want to think about how to change society generally.
I think the maintenance loan should be higher so that they can cover all the extra costs, because I don't think it should be based on your parents' income, as they might not be able to afford to pay all the extra fees and they might not want to.
I think that further education should be free, and anybody who wants to go into further education should be able to do so regardless of money worries and commitments that they may have that may prevent them from being able to access further education.
Oh my God!
In 2010, following the Conservative and Lib Dem coalition's increase of the university fees cap, a series of protests and riots took place all across the country, with the most notable happening in London. A lot of the protests were peaceful, with only a handful turning violent. The protests and riots were predicted to have changed the way the government would handle the university fees crisis, but it led to no change and only further increases.
I don't remember it personally because I was like 10 at the time, but I have read about it and I don't think that it's affected things about how university is now.
I can remember there being a lot of media coverage about a breakaway group of protesters who stormed one of the Conservative Party buildings, and so a lot of the coverage on the news, etc., was about that breakaway party rather than the actual reason that the students were protesting. And also a lot of anger towards Nick Clegg, who, as part of his manifesto in the elections, had said that they would have no fees for students, and then as soon as he became the deputy, that was out the window, and so there was a lot of anger towards him because people had voted on the basis of his student manifesto.
The protest rights were really widespread. There was lots and lots of huge protests in London, but also in lots of cities around the country. I attended some protests in Leeds, which were some of the biggest protests I've ever seen, really. Lots of anger, lots of energy, but unfortunately they did very little good.
I don't have much recollection of the riots because I was quite young and I didn't think that it impacted me much at the time, but obviously enough wasn't done because the tuition fees are still really high, so I think more needs to be done about that.
The cost of university and the issues surrounding it have affected a lot of people, with the most affected group being the students who have to pay for and live with the cost of higher education.
When decided to go to university, I did wonder about the cost because I wasn't sure about how I would pay it back and how I would be able to manage with the living costs, accommodation and food and water and stuff like that. So I was stressed about that.
Well, my parents don't make much money, so that was a big factor in whether or not I went to university. But now that we've figured out the costs, I've decided that I can go.
I think students now pay an enormous amount compared to what we used to pay. They have to pay for everything, whereas most things were free when I went to university. So now students have got debts, enormous debts to pay off through their entire life, really.
Even though the cost of university is very high, many people believe that the education they will receive is worth the cost and would rather carry the debt with them than miss out on higher education.
I don't really think about it that much because I just want to get straight into uni and straight into making things.
I don't think the cost of university was much of a factor for me because I always really wanted to go. And I knew that even though it was really expensive, I will eventually pay it back and I think it's worth it, but I can see why a lot of people didn't go to university because it is really stressful when you're here thinking about having to pay for it afterwards.
The overshadowing debt left from university is a huge factor in why some people don't think that university is an option. Even though your student debt doesn't have to start being paid back until you're earning over £21,000 a year, a lot of people still dwell on the amount that needs to be paid back.
It does worry me quite a bit because if I go straight into a good job after uni, then I'll have to start paying it back straight away.
It doesn't really worry me that much because it's just all in little bits.
It does worry me, but because I'm still in university, not as much as I think it will do, but being in my last semester of third year now, I am starting to think about it. But the thing that kind of keeps me positive is the fact that both my parents went to university and they've never said that the debt was too much for them. They kind of managed to pay it off. I don't know how it works, but I know you only have to pay it back when you earn a certain amount of money, so I'm not too worried about it because everybody goes through it.
There is a long-standing debate as to whether higher education should be free. The arguments for this consist of things such as giving worse-off people access to university and that students shouldn't have to pay to learn. But on the other hand, there are a lot of arguments against making university free.
I don't think it should be free because paying for higher education allows you to have more freedom within what equipment you use, and it just kind of frees up the amount of equipment you can use to actually produce quality content.
I don't think it should be free because that means everyone will be able to go, and then it wouldn't really be higher education then because everyone would have the same qualifications, and then jobs would be really competitive afterwards.
Another issue that is very prominent in the discussion of higher education is that it could potentially prohibit students with worse-off families from going to university. This is one of the main reasons why I think that the cost of university should be lowered or even abolished.
It'll definitely put people who want to go to uni off because they won't have enough money to actually repay it. Or like, since they come from a poor background, they might not realise the bigger picture of uni, so they might not realise that you can actually be earning more than originally how you started off with when you started uni. So I think coming from a poorer background makes you a little bit more money conscious when it comes to big things like uni.
A lot of my friends at university, in fact all of my friends, all come from fairly wealthy backgrounds, like middle class backgrounds. I don't really know of anyone, and I haven't really met anybody who isn't from a middle class background. And also where I'm from originally in Yorkshire, I know that a lot of people who I went to school with didn't go to university, and I think that's maybe because they live in a poorer area.
Current and future students are not the only ones who have had to deal with the pressure of paying for their education. Older people who have been to university and have paid their debt back have a much more personal experience of the issue.
So I went to university and did a degree, and then after that I did a postgraduate degree, so I had 2 lots of student loans to pay off. And so I was in debt for about 10 years afterwards, and then stopped paying the student loan, and they cancelled the loan eventually.
Although there were no fees when I went to university in the 80s, I had to take out overdraft because although I got some money from my parents to support me for living expenses, it was never enough, and so I had to work as well whilst a student, and aged 51 now, finally paid off my student finance commitments about 2 years ago.
Overall, people's opinions on the issues and controversy surrounding this discussion differ. Through age, political stance, and the individual's upbringing, everyone has different things to say on this topic. However, one thing that everyone I spoke with agrees upon is that the cost of higher education is extortionate and a solution is greatly needed. But in my opinion, I don't think there will be any solution in the near future, if ever.
I don't envy students today. They've got it so hard, both in terms of their experience at university and their life afterwards.